Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Wisteria here as always. This fairy tale is called The Terrible Head. It's the tale of Perseus and the Gorgon. Once upon a time there was a king whose only child was a girl. The king was told by a prophet that his daughter's son should kill him. This news terrified him so much that he decided never to let his daughter be married, for he thought it was better to have no grandson at all than be killed by his grandson. He therefore called his workmen and bade them to dig a deep, round hole. Then he had a prison of brass built in the hole. When it was finished, he locked up his daughter. No man ever saw her, and she only saw the sky and the sun. For there was a wide window, and it was open in the roof of the little brass house. She would see it through that, but only that. So the princess, she would sit, watching the clouds float across, and wondering whether she should ever get out of her prison. Now, one day it seemed to her that the sky opened above her, and a great shower of shining gold fell through the window in the roof and lay glittering in her room. Not very long after, the princess had a baby, a little boy. But when the king, her father, heard of it, he was very angry and afraid, for now the child was born that should be his death. Yet he had not the heart to kill the princess and her baby outright, but he had them put in a huge brass-bound chest and thrust out to sea, that they might either be drowned or starved, or perhaps come to a country where they would be out of his way. So the princess and the baby floated in the chest all day and all night, eventually driven by the waves against the shore of the island. There it did lay, until a man of that country came past and saw it, and dragged it onto the beach. When he had broken it open, well, behold, there was a beautiful lady and a little boy. He took them home, and was very kind to them, and brought up the boy till he was a young man. Now, when the boy had come to his full strength, and the king of that country fell in love with his mother, and wanted to marry her, he knew that she would never part from her boy. So he thought of a plan to get rid of the boy, and that was it. A great queen of a country not far off was going to be married, and this king said that all his subjects must bring him wedding presents to give her. He made a feast to which he invited them all, and they all brought expensive presents. But the boy had nothing, though he was the son of a princess, for his mother had nothing to give him. Then the rest of the company began to laugh at him, and the king said, "If you have nothing else to give, then you must go fetch the terrible head." The boy was proud and spoke without thinking. "Then I swear that I will bring the terrible head, if it may be brought by a living man. But of what head you speak, I know not." Then they told him that somewhere a long way off there dwelled 3 dreadful sisters, monstrous, ogreish women, with golden wings and claws of brass, and with serpents growing on their heads, instead of hair. Now these women were so awful, and very, very awful indeed, to look at and to look upon, that whomever usually saw them was turned to stone at once, and 2 of them could not be put to death. But the youngest, whose face was very beautiful, could be killed, and it was her head that the boy had promised to bring. When he called and told his mother, she was so very worried, and after hearing the full story of this head, He was sorry that he had sworn to actually bring the terrible head, but still he spoke with his mother and was determined to keep his oath. So he went out from the feast, and he went and sat down on a rock, looking toward the sea and wondering how he should begin to fulfill his vow. Then he felt someone touch his shoulders. He turned and saw a young man like a king's son, having with him a tall and beautiful lady, whose blue eyes shone like stars. They were taller than mortal men, and the young man had a staff in his hand with golden wings on it, and even 2 golden serpents twisting round it. And he had wings on his cap and on his shoes. The lady said that to kill the dreadful woman with the golden wings and the brass claws, and to cut off her head, he needed 3 things first: a cap of darkness, which would make him invisible when he wore it; next, a sword of sharpness, which would cleave iron at one blow; and last, the shoes of swiftness, with which he might fly into the air. Then the young man, taking off his own shoes, said, "These are the shoes of swiftness. You will use them until you have taken the terrible head, but then you must give them back to me. Now, first, you must go to the 3 grey sisters, who live far off in the north, and are so cold that they have only 1 eye and 1 tooth among the 3. You must seize the eye and refuse to give it up till they have told you the way to the 3 fairies of the garden. They will give you the cap of darkness and the sword of sharpness, and show you how to wing beyond this world to the land of the terrible head. Now, go at once." The boy thanked them, fastened on the shoes of swiftness, and turned to say goodbye to the young man and the lady, but they had vanished. He leaped into the air to try the shoes of swiftness, and they carried him more swiftly than the wind to a place where the world ends, and all water is frozen. There are no men, nor beasts, nor any green grass. In a blue cave in the ice, he found the Grey Sisters, the oldest of living things. Their hair was as white as snow, their flesh of icy blue, and they mumbled and nodded in a kind of dream, and their frozen breath hung around them like a cloud. The opening of the cave in the ice was narrow, and it was not easy to pass in without touching one of the Grey Sisters. But, floating on the shoes of swiftness, the boy managed to steal in, and waited till one of the sisters said to another, who had their one eye, "Sister, what do you see? Do you see old times coming back?" "No, sister, no." "Then give me the eye, for perhaps I can see farther than you." So then that sister passed the eye to the second, but as the second groped for it, the boy caught it cleverly out of her hand, slipped from behind them out of the cold cave into the air, and laughed aloud. When the Grey Sisters heard that, they began to weep, for now they knew that a stranger had robbed them. They began to implore the boy to give them their eye back again, and he could not help being sorry for them. They were so pitiful. But he said he would never give them the eye till they told him the way to the fairies of the garden. Then they wrung their hands miserably, but at last they told him how to reach the island of the fairies of the garden. Then he gave them back the eye, and at once flew away till he saw a beautiful island, crowned with flowering trees. There he alighted, and there he found the 3 fairies of the garden. They were like 3 very beautiful young women, dressed one in green, one in white, and one in red. And they were dancing and singing round an apple tree with apples of gold. These dancing fairies were very unlike the Grey Sisters, and they were glad to see the boy, and treated him kindly. They gave him a wallet and a shield, and belted the sword of sharpness round his waist, and set the cap of darkness upon his head. They then said now, even they could not see him, though they were fairies. Then they each kissed him and wished him good fortune. So the boy flew beyond the great river that lies coiled like a serpent round the whole world, and the banks of that river, there he found the three dreadful sisters, all asleep beneath a poplar tree, with dead leaves all about them. Their golden wings were folded and their brass claws were crossed, and two of them slept with their hideous heads beneath their wings like birds, and the serpents in their hair writhed out from under the feathers of gold. But the youngest slept between her two sisters. She lay on her back, with her beautiful face turned to the sky, and though she slept, her eyes were wide open. If the boy had seen her, would he have changed his mind and been turned into stone if her eyes were really open by terror or the pity? The others were so awful, and she was not. Easy to be deceived. He thought of a plan for killing her without looking at her face if she were to become awake. And as soon as he caught sight of the three from far off, he took his shining shield from his shoulders and held it up like a mirror, so that he saw the dreadful sisters reflected in it, and did not see the terrible head itself. Then he came nearer and nearer, and drew the sword of sharpness, and struck once, and just once. The terrible head was cut straight from the shoulders of the creature, and the blood leaped out and struck him like a blow. But he thrust the terrible head into his wallet and flew away without looking behind. Then the two dreadful sisters, who were left wakened and rose in the air like great birds they did, and though they could not see him because of his cap of darkness, they flew after him up the wind, following by the scent through the clouds, like hounds hunting in a wood. They came so close that they could hear the clatter of their golden wings. He definitely heard the clatter of their golden wings, and they heard his on his feet. And their shrieks to each other he could also hear, as they chased him. The shoes of swiftness, though, they flew too fast for them, and at last their cries and the rattle of their wings died away, as he crossed the great river that runs round the world. The boy flew straight eastward, trying to seek his own country. But as he looked down from the hair, he saw a very strange sight. A beautiful girl chained to a stake at the high water mark of the sea. The boy was very sorry for her and flew down and stood beside her. He took off the cap of darkness, and there he was, the handsomest young man she had ever seen in all her life. And he thought her the most beautiful girl in the world. With one blow of the sword of sharpness, he cut the iron chain that bound her. She told him that she was the daughter of the king of that country, and that she had been tied there to be eaten by a monstrous beast out of the sea. For the beast came and devoured a girl every day, and the lot had fallen on her. Now, just as she was saying this, the long, fierce head of a cruel, cruel sea creature rose out of the waves, and snapped and snarled at the girl. The boy whipped the terrible head out of his wallet and held it up, and when the sea beast leaped again, its eyes fell on the head, and instantly it was turned into stone, thus convincing the boy that those eyes would turn anything into stone, whether sleeping or awake. The boy and the girl went to the palace of her king, her father, where everyone was weeping for her death, and they were married with the most splendid rejoicings. After a while, the boy and his bride set forth for his home. But whom should he meet in the streets but his own mother, flying for her life from the wicked king, who now wished to kill her because he found that she would never marry him. She was running for her life, The wicked king was following her, brandishing a sword in his hand. Then the boy shouted out to the king, "I swore to bring you the terrible head, and see how I keep my oath." The boy drew forth the head from his wallet. When the king's eyes fell on it, he was immediately turned into stone, just as he stood there with his sword lifted. Now the boy and his wife and his mother, they all travelled back to the kingdom that was rightfully theirs, and the wicked king died, so they were able to live long and happy after all their troubles. The end. And that's the end of that story, guys. But a few things I do want to mention. Some of the wording's rather odd and spelt differently. Maybe that's because of the age. But another thing to mention is that there's about 4 stories in that one story. And if you think back to all that we have read, I'm pretty sure you'll find likeness from others, all combined into this one. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Please, if you're listening on YouTube, hit the like, share if you can, and if you've not subscribed, please consider doing so. Many blessings.